reports always kind of coming back to the idea of the UN, referring, if that's, I'm quoting here, Secretary of State Blinken, if we give up Ukraine, we are giving up the UN Charter. So that's what they're stressing here. It is not only about Russia, it is not only about Ukraine, it's really about the idea of the UN, which was founded after the Second World War with the idea to help those countries to defend themselves which are not strong enough, or sorry, I repeat that, to help those countries to defend themselves which do not have enough weapons to do so without the help of others. So this is always coming back to the UN Charter here.
Melinda, if we can talk a little bit about what, if any, impact today's debate at the UN Security Council will really have? I mean, what will its effect be?
Well, in fact, if we do go back to the UN Charter, this organ, the Security Council, is the central part of the UN for enforcing and maintaining peace and security. And it has the power to agree on resolutions, unfortunately, unanimously, which can then essentially direct...
I'm going to have to interrupt you right there. I'm so sorry, Melinda, because we're going to cross live now to the UN in New York and listen to Annalena Baerbock.
Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine is causing nothing but destruction, suffering and death. Yesterday, the General Assembly sent a powerful message against this ruthless war. An overwhelming majority of 141 states stood united for peace in Ukraine. A peace that is just, comprehensive and lasting. And the General Assembly presented a peace plan. A peace plan that is based on the principles of our UN Charter. Today, the eyes of the world are on the Security Council, the body that bears primary responsibility for the maintenance of peace and security in this world. Every further effort to move towards peace from a member of this Council is, in my point of view, valuable. But peace must mean peace. Peace must not mean that we ignore who the aggressor is and who the victim. Because subjugation is not peace. Not naming the aggressor would mean accepting a world in which the mighty rule. It would mean accepting a world in which bombing schools, kidnapping children and shooting people off their bicycle is part of foreign policy. Not standing by the side of the victim would mean a world in which none of us would be able to sleep peacefully, because we would all have to fear an attack by our stronger neighbor. To prevent such a world, the United Nations was founded. That's why we cannot stand idly by. The Charter obliges us, the nations of the world, to act. Now that some of you claim that by sanctioning the aggressor, by standing by the side of Ukraine, by supporting Ukraine by its right to self-defense, we are adding fuel to the fire. I would like to ask you, where would Ukraine, that voluntarily gave up its nuclear weapons because it believed in peace, would be today if we had not supported its right to defend itself, supported their people, elderly, mothers, fathers, children, together with so many international partners. Can we imagine what this would mean? To have more Buchas, Kharkivs, Mariupols, more Bakhmuts, more atrocities against civilians, more children drawing pictures with a house where their beloved ones once lived. Imagine more crimes against humanity, and we would have stand idle by? I don't want to imagine such a world. I don't want to be responsible for such a world. I think most of us don't want to be responsible for such a world. Therefore, I would like to underline what Secretary Blinken said. If Ukraine stops defending itself, Ukraine ends. If we would stop standing at the side of Ukraine, Ukraine would end. The Russian representatives asked just a couple of minutes ago here in this council, why would we think that Ukraine would end? Well, because 1 year ago, your president just told us that he would like to demilitarize Ukraine. And we saw for 365 nights and days what that meant. That your tanks didn't bring water, that your planes didn't drop baby nutrition, but your tanks and planes only brought night and day destruction and death of thousands of fathers and mothers and children. And yes, it brought also death and destruction around the world, not directly by tanks and bombs, but by the food crisis. And yes, you, everybody on earth, can deceive yourself, but you cannot deceive the world. All those of us who sincerely and honestly believe in a peace that means peace, a peace based on the Charter of our United Nations, must show their true colors now and stand by the peace plan by the General Assembly. President Putin is speculating that at some point our clear stance against this war will weaken. He is speculating that by staying the course, this war for aggression will be rewarded for a war that is also causing great suffering to his own people. Some 200,000 Russians have already been killed or wounded. Hundreds of thousands of Russians have left their country because they don't want to be part of this war. Russian children going to schools in Germany, and I'm very happy about this. More than 1,000 international companies have pulled out of Russia, taking with them a crucial part of Russia's prosperity and intelligence. This war is not the world's war. This war is not the war of the Russian people. This war is Putin's war. The Russian president is risking the future of his own country, of his own soldiers, his own children. That's why a just peace, a peace plan presented yesterday by the 141 states at the General Assembly, is also in the interest of the people of Russia. When I look around this table, I'm under no illusion. We will not convince the Russian representative today. He's not even listening. But what we can do is that this council will not turn a blind eye to Bucha, Kharkiv, Mariupol, and Bakhmut, to the people and the children of Ukraine. What we can do is stand up for a world where peace means peace. Thank you.
I thank Her Excellency, Ms. Baerbock, for her statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Edgars Rinkēvičs, Minister.
And that was Germany's Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock addressing the UN, speaking, making a strong call for unity against what she called Putin's war, and a strong call for support for the peace plan, which was voted on yesterday by the UN. And joining me here to discuss what we just heard from Germany's Foreign Minister is DW senior political analyst Melinda Crane, and we're joined from New York by DW's Ines Paul. Ines, give me your first impressions of what we just heard from Annalena Baerbock there, what she said and the tone that she struck.
was very strong. It was very personal and very dedicated to the case of the UN. You know, it was interesting to watch her, how she listened to the speeches of the Russian speaker and the Chinese speaker. And she referred directly and indirectly in her speech to both of them by saying, no, we are not adding fuel to the fire if we help Ukrainians. And no, it is not that we trust Putin, that he would not overtake Ukraine if Ukraine wouldn't have enough weapons to defend itself. It was also a clear message to the Russian people. She said it's not the war of the Russian people, it's Putin's war. So she's kind of also indirectly reaching out to the average Russian by saying it is Putin and it is not your fault.
Thank you, Ines. Melinda, she also talked about the limits of the UN Security Council, didn't she? Which is obviously a very pertinent subject right now.
Absolutely. In fact, this is her second speech within 24 hours. She also spoke yesterday in the General Assembly debate, and arguably that debate was more important than this one, although this is the central organ of the United Nations that is dedicated to enforcing peace and security. And this body can actually issue resolutions that have binding force that, for example, order a country to desist from aggression. But it won't do so, because Russia has a veto in this body and therefore prevents it essentially from acting. So is there any point in having this debate? There is, for two reasons. One is it's important for countries to hear different perspectives. And even if the Russian representative wasn't listening right now, this goes on the record. And that essentially is the bridge to the second point. The Security Council cannot now enforce international norms, international laws, but it can reinforce them by calling out violations, by naming aggressors. We sometimes in the legal area refer to name and shame. And that essentially makes things visible and shows the rest of the world that countries, not all members of the Security Council, but a majority, do insist that these norms be respected. And that has a soft law power. It's not enough, but it certainly isn't nothing. Mm-hmm.
Ines, I wanted to ask you, during his speech earlier, the Ukrainian foreign minister, Dmytro Kuleba, said that Russia is counting on the world getting tired of supporting Ukraine. Annalena Baerbock just referred to that as well, how important it is to stand together. What's your sense? Is support waning?
Well, therefore, the vote yesterday at the General Assembly was so important, and that 141 nations voted in favor of this resolution, which was brought in by Ukraine, is telling that there is still a large majority of the UN members, it's 191 nations altogether, who is supporting Ukraine. But this definitely is a fear here in New York and around the world. And therefore, as Melinda just said, therefore these meetings are so important, because different nations are able to be heard. They don't have the feeling that it's only like the strong US or maybe some other rich European countries who are dominating the discourse. So, you know, during the last 2 hours or so, it was interesting to listen to the representative of Brazil, who is in support of sending weapons and munition to Ukraine, but was also stressing the fact that it is so important to come back to the table and talk with each other. So it's the different nuances which get space here, and that makes this assembly, that makes the UN such a crucial, really organization in times like this.
Ines Paul reporting from the UN in New York, and DW senior political analyst Melinda Crane. Thanks so much to you both for that analysis. And We are going to go to China now, which has, of course, tried to position itself as neutral in the war, even though it maintains close ties with Russia. Beijing has unveiled a 12-point peace proposal timed to coincide with this anniversary.
It was much anticipated and presented with fanfare on Chinese TV, the 12-point peace plan. The foreign